This week on the Brody File, religious liberty under attack in Indiana. We're on the ground with one of the main players who pushed the bill through.
There is more religious hostility than we've ever seen before. And there is a conformity in our culture that is very politically correct.
Also, a dilemma for Christian business owners. Will they have to close their doors because they could be sued for discrimination?
If a lawsuit came up and the court ruled against our favor, it would devastate our family business.
And the hypocrisy on religious liberty, one-on-one with conservative radio host Peter Heck. He has strong words for CEOs who want to boycott Indiana.
They want the positive press. They want to look like they're caring and sensitive individuals. They know which way the media winds blow on this, and so they get behind a microphone and say what they're going to be hailed in the media for saying.
We are in the Hoosier State as we explore the religious liberty issue. The Brody File, next. And welcome everybody to another edition of the Brody File. We are here in the beautiful Indiana State House here in Indianapolis, Indiana, and what a perfect place to do a show on religious liberty because indeed, as you've been reading in the headlines, Indiana under attack when it comes to religious liberty. Cue the graphic. Religious liberty indeed under attack here in Indiana. And of course, unless you've been hiding under a rock, you know all about it. You've seen it everywhere. And I have to tell you, religious liberty clearly is a tier A issue in this country right now when it comes to how evangelicals view the world. Obviously, abortion's a big issue, gay marriage as well. But religious liberty is right in there, definitely tier A. And Mike Pence, the governor here in this great state, has had to navigate those waters. Of course, he tried to do the right thing by passing the Religion Freedom Restoration Act, but then, of course, had to come back and dial it back a little bit when the whole hubbubaloo became apparent. And so here's some of how he tried to maneuver himself throughout this debate.
The suggestion that because we passed a law to strengthen the foundation of religious liberty in our state courts, that we had in some way created a license to discriminate. It's deeply offensive to me, deeply offensive to millions of Hoosiers, and we're going to correct it and move forward. Every American cherishes religious liberty. We all understand the importance of the freedom of conscience. It's enshrined in our Constitution. It's enshrined in the Constitution of the state of Indiana. And that's what this is about. But look, I understand that the perception of this has gone far afield from what the law really is.
Governor Pence trying to set the record straight. He's obviously had quite a bit of fallout from this. We'll see how that plays out in the near future. One guy behind this effort, as a matter of fact, we want you to see a picture here. See that guy? There he is. We circled him. Micah Clark. He is with the American Family Association. He's really been one of the key guys pushing this bill in Indiana, and we had a chance to speak to him here on the ground. What is this whole last, I say month, it's been longer probably. I mean, what has this whole process been like for you? Because, you know, folks will love to come after folks like yourself and others on this, but tell me about some of the misconceptions out there.
Well, we never really thought this law was going to be that controversial. I mean, we're talking about a law that we modeled after federal statute that has been around for 22 years, passed the Congress unanimously, was never controversial. 19 states adopted similar laws, and 30 states actually have a legal practice like a Religious Freedom Restoration Act, or RFRA, which is what we modeled after. So we knew there might be some opposition, but we didn't think it was that controversial. We weren't reaching for the moon. We were trying to copy something other states had, Illinois to the west of us and Kentucky to the south of us, that we thought would be beneficial for Indiana in protecting religious liberty. And the law is entirely about government overreach and government infringement of religious liberty and religious freedom of individuals of all faiths. This was to protect all Hoosiers, regardless of their faith, from a government overreach that would curtail their religious practice.
How surprised were you at this reaction exactly?
I was very surprised, probably even more frustrated, because the reaction was based entirely on a lie and on multiple lies that the media fostered upon us, lies that we knew weren't true. I mean, again, we're talking about established legal practice that's been around for 22 years. We knew what a RFRA law would do, what it would not do. So when the media started reporting these claims that it was about discrimination against denial of service, I mean, they acted like this was Indiana reinventing Jim Crow laws and keeping blacks out of restaurants. And it was never that way, never intended to be that way, never used that way. This, again, was about protecting people's individual constitutional rights from a government overreach.
Not to bring up the whole like baker example, the Christian baker that we've heard so much about, but just to clarify for people so they understand, this isn't about someone who happens to be gay who comes in and let's say the Christian baker knows this person, knows they're gay, they want to just buy a cupcake. It's not about them not allowing them to buy a cupcake, but it's about the service if they want something, let's say, for a gay wedding. Is that the distinction here?
That's the distinction in the debate. Now, RFRA has never been used for that. So put that aside for just a second. But what you're pointing at, I think, is the difference between service and participation. As a Christian, I think it's wrong if I'm a baker to deny service to anybody, unless they're disruptive. You know, the old no shirt, no shoes, no service. I guess that's discrimination now. But if somebody brings a cake to me or buys it, and I say, no, you can't buy this because you're homosexual, that's wrong. But if they buy that cake and take it and decorate it themselves or take it out and stomp on it for a YouTube video, they're free to do that. But when they bring that cake to the counter to me and say, I want you to design it this way and go set it up at my same-sex wedding, that's no longer service, that's participation. As Christians, I think it's wrong for us to participate in things that we have moral beliefs against and the Bible's against.
What has it been like for you personally to see some of the hate directed towards yourself and people that you know that are close to you? What has this been like for you?
It's shocking. I mean, I don't hate anybody, so I get used to being called names, but what's disturbing is people who threaten you and people who boycott certain businesses or go after legislators' businesses. There were a lot of legislators who were really hurt by this, and that's why the fix came through and some of them voted for it knowing it didn't need to be fixed. But you know, God protects me, He's on the throne. I don't worry about that a lot, but there is more religious hostility than we've ever seen before.
Well, obviously religious liberty huge here in Indiana, but quite frankly it's huge all over the country. I mean, look what was going on in Arkansas recently with Governor Asa Hutchinson. He had a similar problem. They tried to pass a bill and then he had to dial it back and say, oh, wait a minute, my bad, I don't want it to discriminate, of course, so I'm going to change the law as well. And indeed he did. As a matter of fact, it was his son, he says, who actually got him thinking about this issue even more closely than he was. And here's a quote from his son, as a matter of fact. This is Seth Hutchinson, by the way, and we should say that he admits he's a liberal, and this is what he says. I love and respect my father very much, but sometimes we have political disagreements, just as many families do. Most importantly, I hope that the groundswell of grassroots opposition to HB 1228 and other similar discriminatory bills around the country will energize more Americans and help create a long-lasting drive for change in this country on many issues. A father-son squabble to a degree, and indeed, talk about squabbles. Religious liberty is a tier A squabble, and it's going to continue on for some time. All right, when we come back in the next block, we're going to talk with a guy named Peter Heck here in Indiana, and he says, what the heck is going on when it comes to religious liberty? He is outspoken, and you're going to hear about what he has to say next. And welcome back, everybody. All right, look, there are a lot of people that are very upset with some of these religious liberty laws. Of course, the gay and lesbian community has been very outspoken. A very small percentage of Americans are gay and lesbian, yet they have a huge megaphone. And so here's a sampling of some of the frustration and disgruntled attitudes on that side of the equation.
I wasn't aware that the First Amendment had been revoked from the Bill of Rights. Where has the religious freedom disappeared? It hasn't.
We don't know what restaurants or what stores we can go into and, not be turned away and have to suffer. That's degrading. It's embarrassing.
Now, of course, that's one side of the issue, but there's a man by the name of Peter Heck who has quite a different view, and we spoke to him here in Indianapolis. He's a conservative commentator. He's in print, he's in radio, he's really everywhere in the state. He's kind of a big voice, and he had a few choice words about what's been going on, not just here in Indiana, but overall on the religious liberty issue. What's going on here? What's the underbelly here?
Well, I believe the underbelly is the entire reason I think a law like this was necessary. You have a very aggressive, a very hostile, political activist movement in the LGBT crusade. And I want to be clear that not everybody who practices homosexuality is part of this political crusade.
Right.
You have a small percentage of the population that is involved in that lifestyle, and an even smaller percentage of that percentage that I would term these activists. And those are the ones that are using the courts to essentially try to wrest control away from the majority, trying to seize upon court rulings and use the judicial branch to achieve their objectives, their political agenda, which includes the dismantling of religious freedom for business owners. And this goes beyond business as well. Anybody that thinks this isn't going to end up going after churches and tax-exempt status, they are not paying any attention to a movement that began with the pervert Alfred Kinsey in the 50s, progressed all the way to modern day. This is a movement that is after sexual anarchy in the culture.
Let me ask you a little bit about the hypocrisy on all of this, because you have Apple CEO Tim Cook and all these other folks, boycott Indiana, but
Right.
Saudi Arabia, maybe
Right.
not so much.
Right.
I mean, what has been your take on some of the corporate hypocrisy here?
The corporate hypocrisy has been one of the most difficult things for me to swallow. I appreciate the fact that corporations are investing in Indiana, and there's a reason they're investing in Indiana. It's a good state to do business in. But when you see CEOs act as we have seen, whether it's Cummins Engine that comes out and speaks out against this law as discriminatory, when Cummins Engine is expanding their plants in states that have RFRAs, when you have, as you mentioned, Tim Cook and Apple, we're going to sell and have more Apple stores in Tehran where they chuck gays off of cliffs onto rocks below. But in Indiana, well, we're afraid that this person might not be able to have their wedding catered by this business if you enact this law. So we're not going to sell Apple products there. We're going to discourage development there in the state. What this is, it's an attempt by, I believe, severely disengaged CEOs. And when I say disengaged, they're disengaged from mainstream America. They want the positive press. They want to look like they're caring and sensitive individuals. They know which way the media winds blow on this, and so they get behind a microphone and say what they're going to be hailed in the media for saying. So often the media is anti-CEO, anti-big business, because that's the typically, historically, liberal position is anti-big business. Mm-hmm. And so here you have an opportunity for these big business types to appear as though they are extremely in touch with the needs of Americans.
So they think it's good PR will lead to potentially good business down the road.
Absolutely right.
Peter Heck here on the Brody File. All right, when we roll on this Religious Liberty show, inside the weeds, kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, with Travis Weber, who breaks down the legal implications of this bill and these religious liberty bills going on across the country. Back in a moment. And welcome back, everybody, to the Brody File here at the Indiana State House in Indianapolis, a religious liberty themed show. There's a guy by the name of Travis Weber. I want to introduce you to him. He's with the Family Research Council, and he kind of breaks this thing down. You know, in other words, are these religious liberty bills that we're seeing, are they really discriminatory? Are they really protecting someone's religious liberty? Now, obviously, he comes from a conservative perspective on all of this, but he does give quite a bit of interesting insight that you might not see otherwise. Have a look. Is this a sign of the times a little bit? Like, for example, when these were passed in years past, I mean, there wasn't the big fervor with the gay rights community. Now, all of a sudden, everything is a problem here today.
I think it is a sign of the times. You know, when this was passed, you had bipartisan support. You had support from a coalition of groups. The ACLU supported the federal RFRA in '93. The ACLU now and other groups have changed their position on RFRA because they see it as impacting their policy and political interests in other areas. You know, in this, we need to scrutinize them for this and call them to the carpet and have them be honest about this. If they want to do that, fine, but state you're doing that. Don't state that you adhere to religious freedom and First Amendment protections, because what you're doing is compromising religious claims, First Amendment protections. When it pertains to certain religions in certain factual scenarios, you're saying, we don't like the Christian claiming they have a problem with being forced to support same-sex marriage. We have no problem with Native Americans and their claims regarding long hair. You can't support one and not the other. Religious claims, a religious claim for one, it should be a religious claim for all. And when you distinguish between them, you're actually discriminating between religions. That's not fair. It's not the way the law should work. And for that reason, we support RFRAs, you know, for all. We support all religious claims in all factual scenarios. That's the way America was founded. That's the way we should run our country and govern ourselves according to these laws.
What is your understanding of the law, the way it's written now at least, as it relates to what we always hear about the Christian florist and the Christian baker? In other words, I mean, if a Christian florist didn't want to sell, you know, what we saw in Washington State with Barronelle Stutzman, I mean, if a Christian florist didn't want to sell flowers to a gay couple at their wedding, what happens at this point under now the Religious Freedom Restoration Act?
Well, and so the claim is weighed by a court, and a court issued a decision on whether her religious freedom can be burdened by the government in that way. Now, you know, we must remember that in her jurisdiction in Washington, there is no RFRA actually, and her case actually shows why state RFRAs are needed, but it doesn't authorize her or anyone just to simply refuse service to whoever they want. If they feel their religion is being burdened by the government, they bring a claim in court. They have to prove to the court that they have a sincere belief that is religious and that's substantially burdened. Only if they meet those three requirements does the case turn to the government. The government then has to prove that it has a compelling interest that's advanced through the least restrictive means. If it does that, it can burden the religion. If it doesn't show those things, it can't burden the religious practice. So as you can see, this is a complicated balancing test. The court will issue a decision after processing the claim through this test. And that's the result that we're living with as a society. So it doesn't permit anyone to just act as they want in the name of religion.
Travis Weber here on the Brody File. All right, when we come back, the personal impact of all of this. Christian business owners in Indiana, it is a tough spot that they are in right now. We're going to explain their dilemma when we come back from Indiana. And welcome back, everybody, to the Brody File here at the State House in Indiana. All right, well, look, there's a whole personal impact to this story, of course. We're talking about Christian business owners. A lot of issues that Christian business owners have to navigate and figure out. Case in point, Sampson's family leather store in Lebanon, Indiana. Casey Sampson, one of the family members who runs the place, actually sat down and talked to us about this. They're in a very tough spot, and Casey explains some of the issues as it relates to this law and what it means for their family business.
We don't support discrimination, and we don't want to discriminate against any, population, race, ethnicity, religious, whatever you want to say, sexual orientation, it doesn't matter. We just don't want to be forced to make something that goes against our will.
And now with some of these changes, now there's a whole new ball of wax. I mean, do you feel like with these changes, this is a new challenge for you at this point?
It potentially could be, and it's scary because the law now specifically states that we cannot discriminate somebody for, and it gives us a variety of different examples, but one of them is we can't discriminate for their religious beliefs. Well, if someone is atheist or Satanism, and they want to come in here and say, God is evil or Satan is great, and that's something I don't want to do, I potentially now have to, or face prosecution in a lawsuit. And it's not prosecution, it's not criminal, but a lawsuit. And that's not fair. That's taken away my religious freedoms for you to have yours. And, frankly, not to just be a backhill patriotic hillbilly, but this is America. We don't do that. You don't force anybody to do anything they don't want to do. As a Christian, we don't believe in hate or hurting another person. We welcome everybody into our store. But like I said just a second ago, I don't want to put something that specifically is contrary to my belief, because I have to hand make that. You know, when I'm stamping into this belt that God is great, and then somebody else wants to come in and, you know, said Satan is great, that's going to hurt me.
That's personal.
It's very personal, because it's not like we have a machine that just hits print. It's not like we're typing it on a computer. It's putting our hand onto the piece with a tool and actually making each an individual letter.
What kind of predicament does this put you in now? Because, I mean, you would think a case like this potentially could come up, a customer.
Well, to be quite honest, we've, you know, I've talked with my family, and, you know, Travis, who's like a brother of mine, he runs all of our manufacturing for our business sides and wholesale side. And we've honestly put a lot of thought into not doing any custom orders anymore. And that'll hurt business.
Casey Sampson here on the Brody File. Back in a moment with some closing Brody File comments. Welcome back, everybody, to the Indiana State House here in Indianapolis. Time, before we leave, for a Brody File religious liberty themed commentary. Well, look, there is so much to talk about as it relates to the religious liberty issue, but let's take this one facet of it. Let's say, for example, a gay customer comes into a Christian bakery and asks to buy a cupcake. Well, that Christian baker needs to sell him the cupcake. If he doesn't, it's discriminatory. There's no doubt about it. I mean, you can't just not sell someone a cupcake because they're gay. Obviously, that's discriminatory. However, what if that gay customer comes in and says, you know what? I want you to cater my gay wedding and indeed provide all of these services for my gay wedding, everything from cakes that say same-sex marriage on it to cakes with a homosexual couple on it. Well, at that point, the Christian owner says, no, I'm not going to do that at all because it violates my religious beliefs. And there is the issue. It's not about selling a cupcake to someone that's, or not selling a cupcake to someone that's gay. That's not the issue. The issue is that when it becomes an act of service as it relates to something that's against your religious beliefs, that becomes different. That's when it crosses the religious liberty line. And I think a lot of people miss that point, but it's something that's going to be debated for many, many, not just months, but quite frankly, years to come. We are at a crux. We're at a real key juncture in our country right now as it relates to religious liberty. All right, well, that does it for us here in Indiana. Thanks to the crew, as always. Mr. Mark Batista behind the camera, Laura behind the camera as well, and Amber C. Strong. You know her, Pop Political, the producer. She's phenomenal. Anyhow, until next time, everybody, God bless. Have a great week.